What is up, Buckeye fans? Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Buckeyes, part of Locked On Podcast Network. I am your host, Jay Stevens, also the host of the Jay Stevens Podcast, and today we have a special guest. It is Jack Grossman. Those of you watching via WKYC in Cleveland, you see him on the screen currently. Jack Grossman, he is of ESPN Louisville, but he also does a lot of things for them for the Indiana Hoosier football and basketball team. It's not football season. We're in the heart of Big Ten basketball season. Jack Grossman, how you doing today, man?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for having me on. Excited to talk some Hoosiers and Buckeyes on the hardwood. If it's half as good as the football game was, we're going to have a great time.
I believe so. And Jack, okay, there we go. I thought you froze for a second, but you're still there. Indiana, the Hoosiers, the basketball team, you and I talked about them previously earlier in the season, but right now we know a whole lot more about them than we did prior to them playing some big games. One against Iowa, they came up winning. Another one, a double overtime win just recently against Northwestern. As you have watched this Indiana Hoosier basketball team play throughout the entire season, what have you learned about them?
Well, that they're going to be squarely on the bubble come March Madness yet again. A tradition unlike any other. Indiana on the NCAA tournament bubble under Archie Miller.
I like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like there's no one that you can count on more to be on the bubble except for maybe Syracuse. That's maybe the only other one you can think of that's just on the bubble every single year. And you got to figure they might figure out a way to be actually on the right side of it this time. But it's a lot of the same issues. They still aren't incredibly entertaining to watch. They don't score a lot of points. They try to win with defense, even though they haven't defended as well as they did in the pre-conference season in Big Ten play. And they're not going to shoot many threes, but when their defense doesn't click, the other team can hit a lot of shots. Opponents are shooting 37% from three in Big Ten play. That is best in the country. Ironically, they have done an incredible job defending three-point line and just defending, period, in their two wins over Iowa, which are their statement victories of the season. Those are their two quadrant one wins. So if you're talking NCAA tournament resume. So it's very much of we're trying to figure out, can this team figure out a way to be on the right side of the bubble?
Wait, did you say that the only two quad one wins are against the Iowa Hawkeyes? Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah, unless Penn State snuck back into the top 30, which Indiana beat at home, which that's been wavering back and forth. They were 33rd in net the last time I checked. Indiana's 2-7 in quad one games.
Oh my goodness! with as much talent as Indiana has, and as you know, I do know Indiana high school basketball pretty well, from Trace Jackson Davis to Armand Franklin to the most recent Mr. Basketball in the state of Indiana. They have a lot of talent there, and for some reason, Archie can't figure out a way to put the talent on the court together and to call plays to where they can win consistently and win big matchups.
Yeah, that's the whole issue. They haven't been able to build momentum as a program under Archie Miller. And they've been able to beat ranked teams. They beat 12 ranked teams since Archie Miller has been in Indiana. That's 4 years at IU, so that's 3 per season. They've beaten 7 ranked teams in the last 2 years. Obviously, the 2 this year becoming both over Iowa. But in the game after the win over the ranked opponent, Indiana's just 3-9 under Archie Miller. So that means they're even when they're able to beat good teams, they can't follow that up and beat another team and build actual momentum out of the big win. And so it feels like anytime you take a step forward, you're immediately taking 2 steps back, and you feel like you're back to square one again, and you can't build any traction as a pro by doing that.
What can Archie Miller do, or if anything, to kind of get on the right side of these games to have more wins in big matchups than losses?
Well, I mean, Indiana's blessing and curse at the same time is that they play to the level of their opponent, which helps them when they're playing, the top teams of the Big Ten, but hurts them when they're playing in Northwestern when it takes them 2 overtimes to win that game, or losing to Northwestern at home earlier this year, barely beating Nebraska by 5, losing to Rutgers at home at a point when Rutgers was really struggling. Kind of ended up being Rutgers' get-right games as they've been playing a lot better since that time. But they have to figure out how to be consistent and put consistent effort, consistent shooting, and just have consistent play game in and game out. Outside of Trace Jackson Davis, you don't really know who's going to show up and who isn't going to show up right now on Indiana. And that's been an issue for multiple years now. I mean, Trace wasn't as consistent at it last year, so you were kind of looking at the entire team of that 2 years ago, you figured you would get a good effort out of Juwan Morgan, Romeo Langford, but other than that, you didn't really know. But it's just sometimes Armand Franklin will score 23 points like he did last night. Al Durham had 24 against Northwestern on Wednesday night, and sometimes Franklin will be 0-7 from the field. Durham will have 2-point drop. Fantasy will be scoreless, and you're just figuring out how the heck are you going to get enough points to where you can actually win a game. And it's been the same defensively either. It's been interesting. Indiana's kind of gotten worse defensively as the years gone on, which is very odd because that's kind of been the hallmark under Archie Miller, is that even when Indiana's so bad offensively, they defend well enough to keep themselves into games, but they just haven't been the same team consistently on that end of the floor that they were earlier in the year. They still show flashes. I mean, Iowa has played 22 games, and they have scored 75 or more in 20 of the 22 games. The only 2 games they haven't were both against Indiana. Not only did they not crack 75, they didn't even crack 70 in either of those games. Those are the only 2 games in the last 2 years that Iowa has been held under 1 point per possession. So Indiana can defend at a high level when they want to, but they haven't done it consistently. And more importantly, they got to be able to put the ball in the basket enough to win games. Because at the end of the day, you got to score more points than the other team. And Indiana struggles to do that, especially late in games.
They do, man. And there was a guy I went to high school with. He's a big Indiana Hoosier basketball fan. For football, he goes with Miami Hurricanes. Both have had their ups and downs. Well, I used to have more downs basketball lately. Miami Hurricane football, that's a headache in and of itself. But as he's been talking about and watching Indiana basketball lately, there's moments. The under 12-minute timeout, the under 8-minute timeout. There's always that stretch, a 4-minute stretch where it seems like IU can't put the ball in the basket. And it's not just this year. It's been going on since Archie was there. Not so much under Tom Crean, but Archie, for some reason, there's always that lag, and it's always in the second half, not the first half. Always in the second half, there's always that lag where it's like, I don't know what to do, speaking as Archie. So guys go on the court, and I don't know if it's the personnel, the 5 that are on the court, they don't work during that stretch. I don't know if it's just the plays that are being called. They're consistent during that time period. But for some odd reason, something is not right during a crucial point in the game. Because under 12 to under 8 timeout, if you fall and you flop and you mess things up, you could very well easily lose that game because of how you play during that time.
Right, and they haven't gotten off to good starts either. That's been a constant issue under Archie. I mean, against Northwestern, who is the worst defensive team in the conference, other than Nebraska, the worst team in the conference. They haven't won a game since December 26th. It took Indiana until the 14-25 minute to score. I mean, it took you over 5.5 minutes just to score a point against that team. You fell behind 21-7, 10 minutes into the game. I mean, you feel like I brought up the 3-9 stat earlier. In those 12 games, Indiana in the first 10 minutes of the next game has trailed their opponent in 11 of those 12 games. So that to me says that is a very clear issue of they get the good win, they feel good about themselves, and then they immediately come out flat in the next game. And slow start's been an issue no matter what happened in the previous result, to where Indiana just takes a while to settle into the game on the offensive end. And you brought it up in the second half too. I tracked it last year. Indiana had a 6-game stretch last season where they had scoring droughts of 6 or more minutes. I mean,
hold on, wait. Excuse me? Say 6 or more minutes?
Yeah, 6 or more minutes.
Oh my goodness. That's atrocious.
Yeah, so I mean, like, they're better offensively than they were last year. Not a whole lot better, but they are better. But you still they still haven't fully solved that issue of it pops up at different points in the game. You mentioned the 12 to 8 minute point in the second half. That's absolutely happened. It's also been a big issue closing games. I mean, you looked at the Illinois game where if they end up on the wrong side of the bubble, there's 3 games you can look at immediately. You have losing to Northwestern at home, which is a quad 3 loss, an absolutely atrocious loss. Then you have losing in double overtime at Wisconsin, a game where you had a 5-point lead with 3 minutes left and couldn't hold on. And then you have a game against Illinois where you are tied 66-66 at home, and Ayo Dosunmu's fouled out. And it goes to overtime, and you can't win the game. Indiana in that game from the 6:24 mark of regulation till the 7-second mark of overtime, so 11 minutes and 17 seconds, had exactly 1 field goal. I mean, it's inexcusable. It's year 4. You have to figure out a way to run better offense. And And for Indiana, I mean, a lot of it is just that they haven't gotten consistent play from the guards. I mean, Franklin looked like he was turning to that guy early in the year. Maybe he might be regaining that form since he did just have the big game at Northwestern on Wednesday, but he hurt his ankle, and he hadn't been the same guy since he came back from that ankle injury. And Al Durham and Rob Finney just haven't consistently put together the production that you need from your starting backcourt. I mean, Finney in his last 4 games is 3 of 22 from the field.
That's ridiculous. I'm sorry. Yeah. I told you, we've done stuff previously. I saw him play in high school. I never thought he would be this player in college. He was way better, more consistent. You couldn't stop him. Now I know high school to college, it's a big jump. But nobody that follows high school basketball in Indiana would have guessed Rob Finney would be this while wearing the Hoosier uniform.
Yeah, it's been a major disappointment. I mean, he just hasn't developed into the player that a lot of people thought he would be, and he has had some injury issues in the past. He hasn't had any this year, so you can't really use it as an excuse. But he just still doesn't look confident shooting the ball. And he's looked, honestly, we talked a couple of months ago. We brought it up. He looks even less confident shooting the ball now than he did then. Like, he has kind of just lost everything right now on that side of the ball. And he still provides some defense. He's Indiana's best on-ball defender. But you're starting to slowly see Archie Miller give Christian Lander more minutes, play Al Durham more at the point guard, to where Finney, instead of playing 30, 35 minutes a game, is only playing 20, 25 minutes a game. Lately, the freshmen have actually come on. They've given Indiana some of their better stretches in the last few games. He's gone to this lineup a few times, actually playing all 4 freshmen of Lander, Christian Lander, Trey Galloway, Anthony Leal, and Jordan Geronimo together with either Chase Jackson Davis or Race Thompson. And Indiana's had some of their best stretches of the season offensively. The ball just moves better offensively when Lander's on the court, and he's not exactly scoring a lot of points right now. In fact, his shot is either he will make it or it'll be an air ball. There's quite literally no in between. It's honestly funny. He has 4 air balls in the last 2 games. It is incredible, but you can just tell the offense moves better. There's a better pace. There's better movement, and he's able to initiate and get other people involved in a way that Rob Finney just has not been able to do it. And then Leal's a guy that can hit some shots. Galloway can make some plays. Looked at the Illinois game. Indiana's top plus-minus guys weren't Finney. It wasn't Durham. It wasn't Franklin. It was Lander, Galloway, and Leal were Indiana's top 3 plus-minus guys. That was the same deal in the Iowa game as well. So those are the guys right now that I know Lander had it pretty bad game against Northwestern. So he's a freshman. He should be a high school senior. He's still not putting it together consistently. But when Indiana's playing well, those are the guys that are kind of having some really big stretches and making some runs for Indiana.
Jack, you mentioned it. I was going to mention this a little bit later, but you already mentioned it. Buckeye fans know about Meechie Johnson, reclassified, joined the Buckeye program in December, first game as a 17-year-old in January. Well, Christian Lander, the same thing, reclassified. They're in Bloomington in Assembly Hall playing with the Hoosiers. 2 guys that are supposed to be in high school that have said, hey, I'm going to reclassify, go to college a year earlier than expected. Buckeye fans know about Meechie Johnson. What should the Ohio State fans know about Christian Lander, another gentleman that reclassified that is playing in the Big Ten right now?
He's a guy, if he's playing well, Indiana becomes a completely different basketball team because he does things that just no one else on the roster is able to do. He can create his own shot, and he can initiate for others. And when you're a team that struggles like Indiana does, those are 2 qualities that you're in dire need of being able to do. And Armaan Franklin's really the only other guy that can create his own shot at times. He had the game winner against Iowa on Sunday, but again, he hasn't looked like the guy consistently that he was earlier in the year since he hurt his ankle. So if Lander can come in and play well, you're looking at a guy that is still struggles a lot defensively because he's still not physically built up yet he's to the point where he's actually trying on that end now. He's not a complete pushover, which is encouraging, but like if you end up with Dwayne Washington on him off of a switch, like that's going to be a bucket for Washington 10 times out of 10, that he's just not big enough or strong enough to deal with a guy that's as seasoned and as talented as Washington is. But on the offensive end, you're going to see better ball movement. You're going to see Indiana get into their sets quicker. They're not going to stand and dribble by the Ohio State logo for 10, 15 seconds at the start of the possession, and you're generally going to see Indiana get better shots out of it because of it. Lander may not always end up being the guy with the assist, but Indiana does seem to get better shots when Lander's on the floor.
I've noticed that, and I'm curious. You've watched some Ohio State basketball, watched quite a bit of the Hoosiers. We know EJ Liddell didn't have the best game most recently. The opponent, wow, it escapes Maryland. I don't know why I forgot who they played. They played Maryland. EJ Liddell didn't play well at all. I mean, he played well, but it wasn't so much he's having the point production. He had to do some other things to be a big factor on the court. But Kyle Young, who's not known for scoring a career high in 18 points, Dwayne Washington Jr. had 13 in the first half. Ohio State three-point shooting was on for, I don't know, the first time maybe all year. And I'm sitting back watching the game like, it would be amazing if the Buckeyes could shoot like this from three the entire game, not just the first 20 minutes of play, but literally, Jack, the entire game. What do you think Indiana can do if EJ Liddell starts to get into his groove, hitting mid-range, points in the paint, then also stretching out and hitting three-pointers as well?
Well, that shows how good Ohio State is, because they beat Maryland pretty easily, if I'm remembering the score correctly, even without Liddell having one of his better games. So that shows that you have a lot of other weapons, that you are a complete team and not just one guy going on dominating, even though EJ Liddell has definitely risen to that filling that void that Caleb Wesson left and has become that go-to guy for the Buckeyes. Indiana, I think Indiana matches up fairly well with Ohio State from the standpoint of Race Thompson is one of the best post defenders in the country. I mean, the work that he did against Luka Garza in both games was really, really good. I get it. Garza was in some foul trouble in the second game, didn't play much of the first half. But in the second half, he played all 20 minutes. Thompson was on him for probably 17 of those 20 minutes, and Garza was 5 of 12 from the field. Still got some points from the line. Again, you're not going to completely shut Luka Garza down. He's the best player in college basketball, but he did about as good a job as anyone has done on Garza all year. We saw him do similar things against Wisconsin's bigs, Nate Reavers and Micah Potter. Heck, his kind of big breakout game a few years ago was they threw him in there against Ethan Happ, and he limited Happ to 1 of 8 shooting in a comeback win for Indiana over Wisconsin. Wisconsin back in the 2018-19 year. So he hangs his hat on. He is going to be really tough to be scored on in the post. So I think if he can stay out of foul trouble, which is a big if with him, because he has had some foul trouble issues this season, he's a guy that could give EJ Liddell some issues. What I wonder about Ohio State offensively, or rather Indiana trying to defend them, is throw it into Liddell, everyone stares at him, kick it out to Dwayne Washington or Justin Arns, who's been phenomenal from the three-point line. Those are the guys that worry me, because if they're able to get going, then, because I feel like you're not going to totally shut down Liddell. He's still going to get his. If you're having a good game defensively on him, he's still going to have 10, 12, 14 points.
Right.
It's how do you shut down everyone else to kind of avoid the pitfall of what Maryland came into? Because I'm saying it, I'm sure Liddell will drop 30 now, but I do think that as long as Race Thompson stays out of foul trouble, he will have a puncher's chance to hold his own against Liddell.
One more question for you. I'm not sure how long we'll be on this one, but we could be, because CJ Walker, he did get hurt early in the season, missed some games, and he hasn't started since. And that's a different wrinkle that I think Chris Holtmann noticed. Justin Arn's confidence started to rise. You started to see other players step up in a bigger role. Dwayne Washington Jr., who has been kind of consistently inconsistent at times, but when he is consistent, he is on. He's clicking on the offensive end and defensive end. Justin Arns, I believe he's in the starting lineup, stayed there for the confidence, and CJ Walker adds a little wrinkle, being the first guy off the bench, to where there's, I don't know, a backup point guard in the country that could guard him or has the basketball IQ that CJ Walker has. When CJ Walker comes on the court, how do you, assuming that he still is coming off the bench this week or tomorrow, as this game is going to be on Saturday afternoon, what do you think IU can do to stop Walker, who's a very smart basketball player?
Well, if you end up with Walker against Lander, he's going to attack Lander every time down the floor. I mean, there's no way around it. I love Lander. I think he has a heck of a lot of potential. I want Indiana to be playing him more, but he is still not great on the defensive end, and that's being kind of sympathetic to him, saying that he's not great. So right. I think Indiana would try to avoid that matchup. I don't know who you would put Lander on, though, when he's in this game of Walker's in the game. Maybe you could throw him out on Arns and say we trust that Arns isn't going to try to beat anyone off the dribble because he's more of a catch-and-shoot guy. But you probably see Rob Finney on him a bunch, because I assume Armand Franklin will draw Dwayne Washington Jr. when Walker is in the game, because Finney, as much maligned he's been, is still Indiana's best on-ball defender in the backcourt. He's a guy that matches up well size-wise with Walker, whereas he's probably a little bit too small to try to guard Dwayne Washington Jr. for the entire game. So I think that'll be the matchup there. And Rob does a good job of applying ball pressure in the half court. He's not going to get a lot of steals, but he's able to make guys uncomfortable when he's playing well on the defensive end, to where it's not going to be just like the same cakewalk it would be for C.J. Walker if he does end up with Lander on him.
I lied. One more Buckeye player came to my mind. I can't go out anywhere without mentioning this one. Justice Suing is consistent. He's a player that when I watch him play, it doesn't matter if he's playing Iowa or Maryland or a Northwestern. It doesn't matter who the opponent is, or even Indiana on Saturday. He's going to always do what's needed, get those sneaky rebounds, make it cute key baskets. At the end of the game, you're like, wow, I knew he was there, but I didn't know he was this productive on the court. Justice Suing, to you, Jack, what can Indiana do to say, hey, Justice, we see you're getting a lot of these, you're getting 3 to 4 sneaky rebounds a game. We can't allow you to do that. How does Indiana try to slow down a guy that's been just consistent all year?
It's funny you say that because every time I watch Ohio State, as I'm always prepared for Washington, Liddell, obviously, C.J. Walker, Arns, even to an extent, and Seth Towns as well. But the two guys that I'm always like, oh yeah, they're there and they're good. It's Suing and Zed Key every game. I'm like, damn, I did not realize
Zed Key is my guy, man. I love watching him play.
I think Zed Key's both Zed Key and Suing are guys that could give Indiana a lot of issues, because Indiana is not nearly as deep up front as they were last year. They struggle rebounding. They are not nearly as good of a rebounding team as they were a year ago. So where a guy like Suing, that's the type of player that gives Indiana a lot of issues, because they don't do a good job of cleaning up defensive rebounds all the time on the glass. So he's a guy that could legitimately have 6-7 offensive rebounds in this game if Indiana doesn't box out, do the fundamentally sound things that they haven't been as good at doing this season without adjusting to Joey Brooke. And I can't believe I'm saying that. but because Indiana, I think, is still a better team overall without those two guys, but it has definitely hurt their rebounding. But Zed Key's a dude that's just an absolute mammoth, to where I look at him and it's like, who on Indiana's roster could guard that guy?
Right.
It's just physically capable and strong enough of staying in front of him, saying if he's going to catch the ball on the block and back him down, that he'll be able to keep him from cramming on him. I don't think anyone can do it. I mean, I guess Race Thompson would be the only one, but he's only 6'7", 6'8", right. And he's not big and beefy like Zed Key is. He's a better matchup for a guy like Liddell than a Zed Key. So, and I think another guy that's kind of built the same way, Kofi Coburn, has given Indiana a lot of issues in those two matchups this season and the time that they played in Champaign last year. So I think Key's a guy that Indiana doesn't have a guy that they can match up with and could really give them fits down low.
You're right. Jack, do you have any last comments about this matchup, either Buckeyes related, Hoosiers related, about the game itself before we wrap this thing up?
It would be an absolutely monumental win if Indiana could somehow get it. If we know one thing about Indiana, it's that they play to the level of their opponent. So while I wouldn't be shocked if Ohio State blew them out, and I would assume, if I'm just judging it off paper, that Ohio State would win the game really easily, Indiana just has a tendency to not just lay down and get killed. Keep it close. However, Indiana usually keeps it close and lose at the end. So if it follows the script of a typical Indiana game under Archie Miller, Ohio State will probably win a low-scoring affair. And I will be bad on the post-game show on ESPN Louisville on Saturday about how they had a big scoring drought at the end.
Speaking of that post-game show, Jack, thank you for coming on. You guys can follow Jack on Twitter, Jack Grossman97, right under his name, under his picture there via the video. Follow me on Twitter at JSteven07. Jack, before we go and wrap this up, where can people catch that post-game show that you're hosting at the end of the game?
Yeah, it'll be around 2 p.m. right when the game will end on ESPN 680, 105.7 in Louisville. You can also find it on the TuneIn app. Just search ESPN Louisville. It's on iHeartRadio as well. And I will tweet it out probably 4 or 5 times just to annoy everyone on Twitter at Chad Grossman97. That'll have a link on it also. You can find it at ESPNLouisville.com.
Jack,
and again, Ohio State fans, if Ohio State wins the game, feel free to call in. I'll take anyone. But always game for some banter.
You know, Jack, I might actually call in. I haven't called in yet, but this might be my time after I do some last-minute post-game stuff for the Locked On Podcast Network. I might call in, just have fun a little bit. You never know. I might surprise you.
Would love it, Jay. Would be great.
Jack, thank you so much for being. You're literally the first guest via video here on WKYC in Cleveland since I've been doing this show once a week. So this is a great honor. I'm glad to be with you talking some Hoosier basketball between the Hoosiers and Buckeyes as they play tomorrow, 12 o'clock Eastern. I believe the game is in Assembly Hall as well in Bloomington, Indiana. Am I correct with that?
No, it's in Columbus.
Wow. You see, I write things down, and then I forget what I wrote down because it's not around me.
And now I feel like I have to double check.
It is. No, it is. You're correct. It is in Columbus. That is my fault. Guys, forgive me. My notes and things aren't in front of me like they normally are. Guys, thanks, Jack, for being here with us. Come back on Monday. We'll recap the big game here on the podcast. Come back a week from today, those of you watching via the video in WKYC in Cleveland, for another show via video for those of you that like watching me talk about sports.